had just set down my morning coffee when I heard a car pulling up the gravel drive. The door opened without a knock, and in came my son Michael, his wife Claire, and their 2 kids, with 6 suitcases that landed on my living room floor. Claire did not greet me. She simply said, "You will be moving downstairs. The upstairs is ours now." I did not flinch, because I already knew what they were after, and if they had any idea what I had prepared, they would never have dared to cross my doorstep. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts in the comments. What would you do if your own child and their spouse tried to push you out of your home like this? I had just set down my morning coffee when I heard the crunch of tires rolling over the gravel outside. At first, I thought it was the delivery truck bringing something I had ordered for the shed. But before I could reach the door, it opened without a knock. My son Michael stepped in, his wife Claire right behind him, and then Sophie and Ryan, my grandchildren, trailing along with faces that told 2 very different stories. 6 heavy suitcases dropped in the middle of my living room with the thud of an invasion. Claire did not offer me a greeting. Instead, she straightened her posture like she was claiming territory and said, "You will be moving downstairs. The upstairs is ours now." I did not flinch. I kept my face calm the way I had learned to do years ago when Evelyn was alive and the world could throw anything at us. Inside, though, I already knew exactly what this meant. They were not here for a short visit. They were here for control. And if they had any idea what I had prepared for this day, they might have thought twice before walking through my door. Michael brushed past me, heading upstairs as though he already owned the place. He passed the grandfather clock my father had given me, the same clock that had been ticking through decades of memories. Claire stayed a moment longer, her eyes scanning the room like a real estate agent appraising what needed to go. Sophie offered me a small, hesitant smile. She always tried, that girl, even when caught between 2 worlds. Ryan barely looked up from the glow of his phone, too absorbed in whatever mattered to him that day. "Nice to see you too," I murmured, but nobody heard me. Drawers upstairs began opening and closing, the sound of zippers, hangers sliding, suitcases being emptied into closets that were not theirs. I took another sip of coffee, letting the bitterness ground me. In the old days, when Evelyn was alive, this house never felt invaded. Even when people showed up unexpectedly, the warmth of her presence made it feel like a celebration. We bought this place in the late 1980s, a tired old 2-story by Maplewood Lake, its siding peeling and its roof groaning every time a storm rolled through. We worked through the years, fixing it with our own hands, arguing sometimes, but always laughing more. By the time we finished, the house was not just wood and nails. It was our proof of sacrifice, our reward, our place of safety. Now I listened to my son walk through it like a contractor sizing up a property he had already decided was his. And I felt that sense of safety being stripped away, piece by piece. "Michael," I called, keeping my tone level. "What exactly is going on here?" His voice floated down from upstairs. "We told you, Dad. We are having work done at the house and needed a place to stay for a few weeks." "I do not recall you telling me that." "You must have forgotten," he said, his words carrying the sharp impatience of someone pretending to be casual. Claire appeared at the top of the stairs with that smile she wore when she was pretending to be gracious. "We will be out of your hair before you know it." "That is fine," I replied. "But the upstairs—" "Dad," Michael interrupted, leaning over the railing. "The stairs are not good for you anymore. This way, you have the bathroom right there. No risk of falling." I met his eyes and saw the rehearsed tone, like a salesman giving a well-practiced pitch. "I have managed those stairs for over 30 years, I said. Claire's smile widened, though it never reached her eyes. "And we want you to keep it that way. Let us help." Some arguments cost more than silence. I turned toward the small room off the living room, the one Evelyn and I had always used as a guest room. A single bed, a small dresser, no closet, more storage nook than bedroom. Now it was mine. By mid-afternoon, their presence was everywhere. Michael's duffel bag slouched against my sofa like they owned it. Claire had draped one of her scarves over the armchair where Evelyn used to sit and read. My coffee table now carried an arrangement of scented candles that smelled faintly of lavender and chemicals, nothing like the simple wooden bowls of pine cones Evelyn loved. I caught Claire in the kitchen, staring into my fridge. "This milk expired yesterday," she said, holding it up like evidence. "I drink it with my coffee," I replied. "Michael, pick up almond milk later," she called. "I have lived this long without almond milk," I muttered. "Well, we will just make a few small changes," she said with that same thin smile. I stepped out onto the deck for air. The lake rippled under a pale sky, 2 geese floating near the reeds. Out here, the air still felt mine. Helping family was never the issue. I had paid for Michael's college tuition, covered his down payment, even saved his mortgage when the market crashed. I never counted those debts. But this felt different. This was not asking. This was assuming. Assumptions are the first bricks in a wall that can close you in. When I came back inside, Sophie was at the sink pouring a glass of water. "Hi, Grandpa," she said softly. "Hi, kiddo. You doing all right?" She shrugged. "College is a lot. You will manage," I told her. "How long are you all staying?" She hesitated. "They said a month, but I do not know." "Emily, come help me," Claire called from the living room. Sophie gave me an apologetic look and left. That night, lying in the cramped guest room, I could hear the low hum of their voices through the floorboards. I could not make out the words, but I knew the tone. People do not bring 6 suitcases for a few weeks. They do not claim the master bedroom for safety reasons. They were here for something more. The next morning, while making coffee, I found a small stack of mail sitting on the entryway table. Most of it was mine, but buried beneath was something that chilled me. Forwarding notices, glossy postcards for senior living communities, and a brochure for assisted care. My name was written on the bundle, but not in my handwriting. Someone had already started filling out forms. I stared at the smiling faces on the brochure and felt the air shift around me. They were not here just to stay for a while. They were laying the groundwork for something else. That thought followed me the next morning like a shadow. Claire was already in the kitchen when I came out, standing in one of Evelyn's old robes, stirring a pan as if she had always belonged there. She did not look up when she said, "We are trying oatmeal with almond butter today, better for cholesterol." "I take my pills for that," I replied, reaching for the kettle. "I will make my own." She slid the spoon into the sink with a clink that sounded more like victory than surrender. Behind her on the counter, I noticed a row of glass jars labeled chia, flax, hemp. My sugar jar had been shoved to the back of the cabinet, and my chipped blue-flowered mug, the one Evelyn had chosen during a summer trip, was buried behind 4 tall white cups that matched nothing in my house. Michael strolled in, tying his tie, hair damp from the shower, smelling of cologne I had never liked. "Dad," he said with a rehearsed gentleness, "structure helps everyone. It keeps things sane." "When exactly did I lose my sanity?" I asked. He chuckled like I had told a joke, but his eyes betrayed nothing. Ryan followed a second later, already complaining that the fridge had no energy drinks. Sophie shuffled in behind him, hair messy, sweater inside out. "Good morning, Grandpa," she said, and I caught the flicker of warmth she always tried to sneak past her mother. At 8:05, Claire tapped the thermostat. "We are keeping it at 72 during the day. The air is too dry." At 8:10, she muted the morning news. "Is there a way to get something less political?" At 8:15, Michael showed me an email from the cable company. "I ordered us a faster router. You will thank me." "I do not stream," I said flatly. "You will," he replied. I carried my coffee out to the back steps, needing air more than caffeine. The lake shimmered with morning fog, gulls cutting through the haze. I sat where the paint had worn away to bare wood, thinking about Evelyn. She used to call the sound of the old marina sign clanging against its pole comforting. Now the sound just reminded me that everything was shifting without my permission. When I returned inside, I noticed something that stopped me cold. The framed photograph of Evelyn and me, the one where we stood on the porch laughing after fixing the railing, had been moved. It used to sit proudly on the mantel. Now it was tucked on the piano behind a pile of glossy magazines. In its place sat a white ceramic knot, something Claire called art. "Less clutter," she said when she saw me looking. I picked up the photo and placed it back on the mantel. "This belongs here," I said quietly. Later that morning, Michael's voice echoed through the house as he paced with his phone, talking about inflated home prices and resale opportunities. Every so often, he would pause in a doorway, eyes scanning as if measuring the space for new furniture. Around noon, a white van pulled into the driveway. A man stepped out with a clipboard and a tape measure. "Here for the kitchen," he said when I opened the door. "Measurements for what?" I asked. "Cabinet refacing. Claire booked a free estimate." I stared past him at my kitchen. Those cabinets held decades of stories. Thanksgiving turkey nearly sliding to the floor, Sophie coloring on the lower panel with a green crayon Evelyn told me to leave as better than paint. My jaw tightened. "Not today," I said. The man looked relieved and quickly retreated, only for Michael to arrive moments later and pat him on the back. "Sorry about that. My dad is old school. We will call you." When the door shut, Michael leaned against it like he was the one under pressure. "Dad, updating the kitchen adds value. You want the house to last, don't you?" "It has lasted longer than most marriages," I said. Claire joined us, her smile sharp. "Small things, smart things. Free estimates do not hurt." "They always start free," I muttered, and her eyes flickered just enough to tell me she heard the truth in my words. That afternoon, I found Claire in the hallway with painter's tape, marking the walls beside our family photos. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Reorganizing," she said, not even looking up. "We need visual consistency." "Visual consistency," I repeated. "You mean erasing?" "We will keep the nice ones," she replied, tugging at a nail holding a slightly blurry photo of Evelyn teaching Sophie how to hold a frog without hurting it. "Leave them," I said firmly. Her hand froze mid-motion. She looked at me like I'd put a hand on her wrist. Before she could argue, Michael's voice carried from the stairs. "Everything okay?" "Your father has feelings about the hallway," Claire said smoothly. Michael descended halfway, his smile professional. "Let us table the gallery wall." The way he said it, like this was one of his business meetings, burned in my chest. I knew then they were not just rearranging the house. They were rearranging me, piece by piece. That night, after dinner, I found myself on the porch again. The air was cold, the lake dark, and the house behind me buzzing with voices I barely recognized anymore. Then Sophie slipped quietly through the door, sweatshirt sleeves pulled over her hands, her face pale under the porch light. "Grandpa," she whispered, glancing back to make sure no one followed. "Do you have a minute?" "For you always," I said. We walked down the steps into the yard, the grass damp with evening. She kicked at a pebble before blurting it out. "I heard Mom talking last night. She was on the phone with someone. She said they already put down money for a place, an assisted living place. For you." The cold seemed to cut deeper at that moment. My chest tightened, but I kept my face still. Evelyn used to tell me never to show your hand too soon. Sophie's words echoed in my head, each one sharp and cold, confirming what I had already begun to fear. They were not just moving in, they were planning to move me out. I slept poorly that night, if it could even be called sleep. Every creak of the floorboards above, every muffled voice drifting through the vents, reminded me that I was no longer the master of my own home. I lay there staring at the flaking paint in the corner of the guest room ceiling, Evelyn's voice echoing in my head in the way it always did when I needed her. She used to say, "Corners need attention, George. If you ignore them, they peel." She had meant the house, but I knew now she was talking about life too. By morning, I had resolved to find out just how far Claire and Michael had already gone. When I stepped into the kitchen, Claire was at the table on her phone, speaking in that low, firm tone she used when she wanted to be taken seriously. "Yes," she said. "We will bring him for the assessment next week. Tuesday morning at 10:15. The paperwork is already in motion. The deposit is cleared." I froze in the doorway, gripping the edge of the frame to steady myself. My name, my life, spoken like a transaction. When she noticed me, she smiled like nothing had happened. "We are out of almond butter," she said. "Michael will pick some up later." I poured my coffee without answering, my hands steady though my chest boiled. Later, Sophie caught me in the yard. She walked quickly, her eyes darting toward the house to make sure her parents were not watching. "Grandpa," she said, her voice hushed. "It is true. They signed something. I saw the paperwork on Mom's desk. Oak Ridge Senior Living. They already put money down. Dad said it is for your safety. They want you there by Thanksgiving." "Thanksgiving," I repeated, the word bitter on my tongue. A holiday meant for family, twisted into a deadline for exile. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. I told him it is not fair. You do not need that place. You take care of yourself better than half the people I know. But he said I do not understand adult decisions yet. I put a hand on her shoulder. You did the right thing telling me, and do not let them make you think otherwise. That evening, when the house grew quiet, I climbed the stairs slowly. Michael and Claire were out, the kids were in their rooms, and for the first time in days, I had a chance to walk through what used to be my space. The master bedroom smelled faintly of their fabric softener, not Evelyn's lavender. Michael's jackets now lined the closet, Claire's dresses draped over the arm of Evelyn's favorite chair. But what I wanted was not clothing. It was the drawer on Evelyn's old dresser, the one we always used for important documents. I opened it, and my chest tightened. There it was. The flat manila envelope we had kept for decades. Inside were the papers that defined my life. The deed to the house, the will, insurance, our marriage certificate. I thumbed through until I found the deed. My name was still there. George Harrington. No lien, no transfer, no shared ownership. It was still mine, all mine. But I knew then what they were counting on. They were betting on my silence, my age, my hesitation. They thought they could slide me quietly into a facility and take over the house as if I would not notice or fight back. They had forgotten who raised them. They had forgotten the man who worked every day on the railroad for 30 years, who learned to spot lies before they landed, who carried Evelyn through hard winters when money was thin and laughter was the only thing that kept the cold away. I tucked the envelope back into place, but not before slipping my phone from my pocket and snapping photographs of every page. Digital insurance. Evidence. That night, as I lay in the narrow guest bed, I stared at the ceiling and felt the plan forming in my chest like a steady drum. They thought I was old. They thought I was weak. But I had survived too much to let my own son and his wife push me out of the home Evelyn and I built. As I closed my eyes, one truth settled deep inside me. If they were moving their pieces into place, it was time for me to move mine. The next morning, I rose earlier than usual, long before anyone else stirred. The house was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator, and for the first time since they had arrived, I felt like I had space to breathe. I made my coffee the old way. Kettle whistling, steam curling from my chipped mug with the faded blue flowers. I set it on the table and pulled out a notepad from the desk drawer. If they wanted to play games, I would keep a record of every move. Dates, names, times, what was said. I had spent decades keeping ledgers as a foreman on the railroad, recording shifts and repairs and shipments. I knew the value of details when others tried to bend the truth. This time, the ledger would be mine. By mid-morning, Claire was up, bustling around in her usual way. She stopped by the entry table and tapped her phone as though she were the manager of a hotel. Cleaning service will be here Thursday. They will take care of the blinds and baseboards, so you do not have to strain yourself. I can manage my own house, I said evenly. Of course, she replied, her smile brittle. But there is no need for you to worry about chores anymore. It was not help. It was occupation. Every gesture, every little change was about control. That afternoon, I walked down to the marina, my steps measured, each one shaking loose some of the anger I had been forced to swallow. My old friend Hank was there, working under the hood of a boat engine. He straightened when he saw me, wiping grease from his hands. George, I did not expect you this early. Everything all right? I gave him a thin smile. House is crowded. He raised an eyebrow but did not pry. Hank had known me long enough to recognize when something ran deeper. What do you need? Information, I said. You still know anyone at the county clerk's office? He chuckled. You know me. I know everyone. What exactly are you looking for? Verification, I said. I need to make sure some paperwork is still exactly how I left it. He scribbled a number on the back of a receipt and handed it to me. Ask for Janine. She will tell you what is what, quietly. I tucked it into my wallet like a weapon. Back at the house, Sophie found me in the garage, pretending to sort through old tools. She lowered her voice so it would not carry. Mom has another appointment scheduled. Tuesday morning. She put it on your calendar. She told Dad it is for an evaluation. She used those exact words. Evaluation, I repeated, testing the word. Not a checkup, not a visit. An evaluation. They wanted a doctor to say what they needed to hear. Sophie bit her lip. I do not like it, Grandpa. She is saying you forget things. She even told someone on the phone you left the stove on last week. That is not true. No, I said, my voice steady. That is not true. I put a hand on her shoulder. Listen, Sophie, I need you to do something for me. You are my radio. If you hear them talk about me, if you see a message, a call, anything, write it down. Times, dates, names, not on your phone, paper only. Understand? She nodded, determination in her eyes. That night, I checked the spare set of house keys hanging on the hook by the back door. They were too accessible, too easy for someone else to pocket. Quietly, I switched them with another set I had filed years ago, identical except for one tiny notch. Anyone using them would find certain locks did not turn quite right. The house clicked and settled as I went back to the guest room. I lay on my back, hands folded, staring at the ceiling. The papers in the dresser upstairs were safe for now, but soon I would have to move them. Evelyn used to say, "Corners peel if you leave them too long." She had been right about the paint. She was right about this too. As the house creaked around me, I knew the time for waiting was over. Claire had scheduled an evaluation, and I intended to be ready before she made her move. The night before the so-called evaluation, I barely slept. Every sound in the house seemed sharper, every creak of the stairs like a warning. I lay in that cramped guest bed, staring at the shadows on the wall, my mind turning over the plan Claire thought she had hidden. She wanted me gone, tucked away where she could replace me with her parents, while Michael stood by pretending it was all for my safety. But I had survived harder winters than this, and I had learned one truth over and over. You cannot let someone else write your ending. I rose before dawn and brewed coffee strong enough to chase away the fog from my head. When Sophie padded into the kitchen, her hair pulled back hastily, she whispered, "It's today, isn't it?" "Yes," I said, stirring sugar into my chipped mug. "Today's the day we see how much they think they can get away with." Her eyes searched mine. "Are you ready?" I was ready the day they carried their bags through that door, I said. She gave me a tight nod before slipping off to get ready for class. By mid-morning, Claire was a flurry of motion, setting the dining room like she was hosting royalty. She adjusted napkins that were never used, wiped the same patch of counter 3 times, and moved chairs around as if an inch here or there would make the room more convincing. Michael straightened his tie in the reflection of the microwave, glancing at me only once. "Dad, just be honest today, all right? Let them see where you're at." I raised an eyebrow. "Where I'm at? Michael, where exactly do you think that is?" He forced a smile, but I saw the flicker of nerves. He wanted this to go smoothly. He needed me to slip. At precisely 9 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Claire hurried to answer it, her face lighting up in that polished, false smile she reserved for people she wanted to impress. A woman in navy scrubs stepped inside, holding a tablet. She looked to be in her 40s, professional but with a softness around the eyes. "Good morning," she said warmly. "I'm Dana. I'm here for Mr. Harrington." "That's my father-in-law," Claire said quickly, placing a hand on my arm like she was presenting me at a county fair. "He's been a little forgetful lately." I removed her hand with a slight motion and stepped forward. "Am I?" I asked, my tone steady. Dana's eyes flicked from Claire to me, assessing without judgment. "We'll just go through a few questions, Mr. Harrington. Standard procedure. Privately, if you don't mind." Claire's face tightened. "Privately?" I thought. "It's always best," Dana interrupted politely. "People answer differently when they don't feel supervised." Claire hesitated, then forced another smile. "Of course. We'll just be in the kitchen." Michael tugged at his collar and guided her away. Sophie hovered in the doorway, uncertain. Dana glanced at her and then at me. "Would you like her to stay?" "Yes," I said firmly. "She stays." We sat at the dining room table, the morning light streaming through the window, catching the dust motes in the air. I could hear Claire fussing with dishes in the kitchen, the sound sharp and brittle. Dana set her tablet down and folded her hands. "All right, Mr. Harrington. First things first. Can you tell me today's date?" I smiled faintly. October 14th, 2023. "And the day of the week?" "Tuesday." She nodded, typing quickly. "And the name of the president?" I gave her the answer without hesitation. She reached into her bag and pulled out a piece of paper with a circle drawn on it. "Can you draw a clock that reads 10 after 11? I took the pencil, steady despite the arthritis in my knuckles, and drew the numbers carefully, placing the hands exactly where they belonged. I slid the paper back to her and leaned back in my chair. She examined it and gave the smallest nod of approval. "Do you remember to take your medications?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out my pill bottle. "Every morning, simvastatin, 10 milligrams. Would you like me to read you the refill date?" Her eyes warmed. "No need. That's thorough." Sophie sat silently, watching, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. Dana continued. "Have you ever left the stove on accidentally?" I chuckled. "Once, in 1993. The phone rang, and my wife was telling me her mother had fallen. We burned the eggs and called them toast." Even Dana laughed softly at that. Claire's head appeared around the corner, her smile frozen in place. "How's it going?" "We're doing fine," Dana said smoothly, dismissing her. Claire lingered a moment too long before retreating, the tension rolling off her like static. Dana leaned closer. "Is anyone pressuring you to move somewhere you don't want to be?" I met her eyes steadily. "People have ideas," I said, "but ideas aren't orders." She tapped her tablet, satisfied. "One last thing. Do you feel safe here?" Sophie looked at me anxiously. I let the silence stretch just long enough to make her squirm, then answered calmly, "I feel safe as long as my granddaughter is around." Dana smiled, closing her tablet. "Mr. Harrington, you are oriented and independent. My notes will reflect that." "Send them to me," I said. "And make sure the clinic knows I rescheduled my own appointment for Monday. My daughter-in-law won't be handling those for me anymore." "Understood," Dana replied with a small grin. When she stood to leave, Claire pounced. "So, how did it go?" Dana gave her professional smile. "You'll receive the report." She glanced at me before adding, "Have a good day." The moment the door closed, the air in the house shifted. Claire fussed with the counter, rearranging items pointlessly. Michael texted furiously on his phone. Sophie let out a breath she had been holding so long, her face turned red. "You were perfect," she whispered. "I didn't even get to tell her about the almond milk," I said, deadpan. She laughed then, real laughter that filled the room and reminded me so much of Evelyn that for a second it hurt. But behind that moment of levity, I felt the weight of what had just happened. I had passed their little test, but this was only the opening move. Claire would not stop with one failed attempt. No, she was too determined, too invested in the outcome. And Michael, my own son, had gone along with it. That betrayal burned deeper than anything Claire could have said. That night, as the house settled into uneasy quiet, I sat at the kitchen table with my notepad. I wrote it all down. Date, time, the nurse's name, what was said, and the look on Claire's face when the evaluation slipped through her fingers. Every detail mattered. When people think you're too old to fight, you fight with paper and precision. Sophie tiptoed in and slid into the chair across from me. "Grandpa," she whispered. I overheard something else. Mom was on the phone again. She said by Thanksgiving you'd be moved, and her parents would be here. She sounded excited. My jaw tightened, my pencil pressing hard against the paper. "Of course she did," I muttered. Sophie's eyes filled with worry. "What are you going to do?" I closed the notebook and looked at her steadily. Exactly what I should have done the day they arrived. Stop reacting. Start positioning. I patted the notebook and whispered to myself, if Claire thinks she's building a plan, she has no idea she's playing against someone who has built plans his entire life. The morning after the evaluation, the house was unusually quiet. Michael had left early for a meeting. Claire was still upstairs pretending to sleep longer than she did, and the kids were getting ready for school. For the first time in days, I had the kitchen to myself. I brewed my coffee slowly, savoring the hiss of the kettle, the steam rising, and the feel of my old chipped mug warm in my hand. I sat down at the table with my notebook, my pencil sharp, and the determination of a man who knew the next move was his. I began by reviewing what I already had. Sophie's whispered confessions, the brochure I had found, Claire's phone call about deposits, and the evaluation appointment she had set behind my back. Everything pointed to one truth: they wanted me declared incapable. Once that label stuck, they could ease me into a facility and claim the house for themselves. But I had something they did not expect. I was documenting everything, and I knew how to make their overreach backfire. After finishing my notes, I made a quiet call to Dr. Sato's office. The receptionist answered politely, and I introduced myself. "This is George Harrington. My daughter-in-law scheduled an evaluation for me. I want to make it very clear from now on, I will be scheduling my own appointments." The receptionist's tone shifted immediately, professional but supportive. "Of course, Mr. Harrington. We can make a note on your file." "Do so," I said. "And please note, no information is to be shared with anyone but me. Not my son, not his wife. Me alone." "Yes, sir." I hung up with a small measure of satisfaction. One move countered. But I knew Claire was not the type to back down after a setback. Later that afternoon, when the house was momentarily empty, I climbed the stairs to Evelyn's old dresser again. I pulled out the manila envelope and spread the documents across the bed. The deed, the will, the insurance papers, our marriage certificate. I photographed each page once more, careful to angle them so the seals and stamps were clear. Then I slid the photos onto a flash drive I kept hidden in a hollowed-out book in my desk. Redundancy. If you have learned anything from 30 years on the railroad, it is this: never trust a single safeguard. Always build backups. I also prepared 2 hard copies. One I sealed in an envelope and tucked beneath the false bottom of the Christmas ornament box in the attic. The other I slid inside a spiral-bound cookbook Evelyn loved, hidden between recipes for casseroles and pies that no one had touched in decades. People snoop in drawers. They never snoop in church cookbooks. When I returned downstairs, I found Sophie waiting for me by the back door. She looked anxious, her backpack slung over one shoulder. "Grandpa," I heard Mom on the phone again. She was talking to someone about legal paperwork. She said something about transfer authority. My chest tightened. Transfer authority? She said they just needed a signature, then everything would be easier. Sophie bit her lip. I think she was talking about the house. I put a steadying hand on her shoulder. You did well telling me. Do not worry. They cannot touch this house without me. The law is clear, but it tells me just how desperate she has become. After Sophie left for class, I sat at the table again and made another list. At the top I wrote, Verify title. Hank's receipt with Janine's number burned a hole in my pocket. I dialed it, and after a few rings, a brisk voice answered. County Clerk's office, Janine speaking. Hello, Janine. This is George Harrington. A friend of mine, Hank from the marina, gave me your number. I need to verify something important. My property deed, her tone softened slightly. Of course, Mr. Harrington. Do you have the address handy? I gave it to her. She tapped at her keyboard, the clatter of keys quick and certain. Owner of record, George Harrington. No encumbrances, no transfers recorded in the last 10 years. Relief washed through me, but it was tempered by caution. So, if anyone tried to claim otherwise, they would need my signature? Correct, she said firmly. Without it, nothing holds legal weight. I thanked her and hung up. One more piece secured. Claire could play with brochures and phone calls, but she could not forge the law without leaving herself wide open. That evening, Michael returned late, the smell of whiskey clinging to him faintly. He loosened his tie and sat across from me. Dad, he began, his voice too calm. You know we are only trying to help. Mom and Claire think it would be best for you to have more structure. I stared at him. Structure? Is that what you call stripping a man from his own house? He flinched, but tried to cover it with a smile. It is not like that. You will still be part of the family. We just want to make sure you are safe. I leaned forward, letting my eyes bore into his. Michael, I built this house with your mother. Every beam, every nail, every stroke of paint. It has stood through storms and decades. And you think I will let you hand it over to Claire's parents as if I am a guest in my own home? Number you may have forgotten, but I have not. His jaw tightened. Dad, you are overreacting. No, I said, my voice low. I am reacting exactly enough. He stood abruptly, muttering something about calling it a night, and retreated upstairs. I sat alone in the quiet kitchen, the weight of his betrayal pressing on me heavier than anything Claire had done. A wife can be selfish, but a son should know better. The next morning brought fresh confirmation of their scheme. A lawyer's office called the house asking to confirm details about power of attorney paperwork. The young man on the phone assumed Claire was my representative. My voice sharpened as I cut him off. There is no power of attorney here. You will remove my number from your file immediately. He stammered apologies before hanging up. I sat back, my heart pounding. So it was true. Claire had gone further than I thought. She was not just testing the waters, she was already trying to move paperwork through channels, banking on my silence to carry it forward. That evening, when Sophie came home, she caught me standing by the window, staring out at the lake. She came up beside me, her voice low. What happened? They tried to file power of attorney, I said quietly, but they will not succeed. Not now, not ever. Her eyes widened. Grandpa, I turned to her. Listen carefully. Everything they try from here on out, we document. Every call, every form, every word. They think they are clever, but they have forgotten that I spent my life reading men who lied for a living. I see them clearer than they realize. Sophie's expression hardened, her youth slipping for a moment to reveal something stronger. I'll help you, whatever you need. I put a hand on her shoulder, steady and firm. You already are, Sophie. More than you know. That night, as the house settled into silence, I returned to my notebook. I wrote it all down: Janine's confirmation, the lawyer's call, Michael's weak defense. And then, beneath it all, I drew a line and wrote, Thanksgiving. They think it is their deadline. It will be mine too. Only difference is, I will not be the one leaving. As I set the notebook aside and turned off the light, I knew one truth beyond doubt. If they thought I would go quietly, they had chosen the wrong man to corner. Thanksgiving week arrived with a chill that crept off Maplewood Lake and pressed against the windows of the house. Claire was in a state of restless energy, running from room to room, polishing, rearranging, and giving orders like a general preparing for battle. She wasn't preparing for family dinner. She was preparing for her victory lap. Her parents were due to arrive with friends, and she wanted the house to gleam like it already belonged to them. I watched her from the corner of the living room, my notebook hidden in the drawer behind me. Every candle she lit, every photo of Evelyn she replaced with some sterile piece of decoration, was a move in her game. But she didn't know that my pieces were already in place. The night before the party, Sophie came to me, her voice urgent. Grandpa, Mom, and Dad were talking in the kitchen. They said after this party, everything will be set. They said you'll be out by Christmas. I put a steady hand on her shoulder. Don't worry, Sophie. Tomorrow they will find out exactly how wrong they are. The morning of the party, Claire's parents arrived first, carrying trays of food and chattering excitedly about how much space the house had. It's perfect, her mother said, running a hand along the banister. We'll be so comfortable here. I smiled thinly and excused myself to the porch. I had heard enough. Let them settle into their fantasy for now. They were about to learn whose name carried the weight in this house. By late afternoon, more guests had arrived. Friends of Claire's parents, neighbors they had invited, even a few of Michael's colleagues. The living room buzzed with conversation, the air thick with the smell of roasted turkey and spices. I moved quietly among them, shaking hands, accepting polite smiles, all while keeping my real plan close to my chest. At exactly 6 o'clock, I stepped outside. My old friend Hank was waiting by the curb, leaning against his truck. Beside him stood a woman in a neat blazer, a leather folder tucked under her arm. Janine from the county clerk's office. She had agreed to come not just as a favor, but because, as she told me over the phone, sometimes people need to be reminded of the law in person. You're sure about this? Hank asked, his eyes searching mine. More sure than I've ever been, I said. We walked together up the path and into the house. The moment the door opened, conversation faltered. Claire looked up from where she was serving drinks, her smile flickering as she saw who I had brought. Michael froze halfway through a laugh, his glass hovering in midair. Sophie's face lit up with something close to relief. Everyone, I said, my voice carrying over the room. I'd like to introduce Janine from the county clerk's office. Janine stepped forward, calm and composed. Good evening. I've been asked to clarify a matter of ownership regarding this property. She opened her folder and held up the deed, the official seal gleaming under the light. As of today, and as of every record in the past 10 years, the sole legal owner of this house is George Harrington. No liens, no transfers, no shared ownership. The room went silent. Claire's face drained of color, her lips parting soundlessly. Michael set his glass down too quickly, the liquid sloshing over the edge. What is this? Claire demanded, her voice trembling but sharp. This is completely unnecessary. No, I said, stepping forward. This is very necessary. You've been making calls, you've been filling out forms, you've even tried to arrange power of attorney behind my back. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? Gasps rippled through the guests. Claire's parents looked at each other uneasily. I don't know what you're talking about, Claire said, her voice brittle. Sophie stepped forward then, her voice strong. I do. I heard you, Mom. I saw the papers. You said Grandpa would be gone by Christmas. You said this house would be yours. Claire spun on her face pale with fury. Sophie, not another word. But the damage was already done. The truth hung heavy in the air. Michael raised his hands weakly, his voice pleading. Dad, please, let's not do this here. This is exactly the place to do this, I said, my voice steady, louder now so every person in the room could hear. You wanted to humiliate me quietly, tuck me away somewhere, and claim what I built with Evelyn. Instead, you'll be the ones facing the truth in front of everyone. Janine cleared her throat. Just to be perfectly clear, any attempts to transfer ownership or authority without Mr. Harrington's direct consent are invalid, fraudulent in fact, and prosecutable. Claire's father coughed, embarrassed. Claire, is this true? Did you really? She cut him off, her voice high and strained. I was just trying to make things easier. He's old, he forgets things. I forget nothing, I said sharply. I remember every nail Evelyn and I hammered into these walls. I remember every bill I paid to keep this roof over our heads. I remember saving Michael's skin more times than he deserved. And I will remember this betrayal until my last breath. The room fell into heavy silence. Michael's face was pale, his shoulders sagging under the weight of his shame. Finally, I straightened, my eyes sweeping the room. This is my house. It always has been. And if anyone here thought otherwise, tonight should end that delusion. Janine closed her folder and gave me a small nod before excusing herself. Hank clapped me on the shoulder as he followed her out, leaving me standing in the center of the living room with every eye on me. Claire's parents quietly gathered their things, muttering apologies as they slipped out the door. The guests, uncomfortable and unsettled, followed suit. Within 20 minutes, the party Claire had planned as her triumph had emptied into silence. Claire stood rigid, her face twisted in rage. You humiliated me. No, I said coldly. You humiliated yourself. You tried to steal from me, and you failed. That shame is yours to carry, not mine. Michael looked at me then, his voice hollow. Dad, not tonight. I cut him off. Not a word. You chose your side the moment you stood by and let her scheme. You will live with that choice. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Sophie stepped closer to me, her hand brushing against mine, a silent show of solidarity. Claire's fury, Michael's shame, the empty house. It all felt like the turning of a tide. As I stood in the quiet ruins of Claire's party, I knew the battle was no longer about survival. It was about making sure they understood I would never be erased. The house felt different the morning after the party. For days, the walls had carried their voices. Claire's orders, Michael's excuses, Sophie's whispers, Ryan's silence. But now, silence felt like it belonged to me again. It was my silence, earned and steady, not the suffocating hush of being pushed aside. Claire avoided me. She spent most of the day upstairs, slamming drawers and muttering into her phone, no doubt spinning her version of events to anyone who would listen. Michael lingered outside on calls, pacing the driveway, trying to pretend he still held authority here. But the truth had been exposed, and no amount of chatter could cover it. Sophie found me on the porch that evening, the sky painted in strokes of orange and purple over Maplewood Lake. She sat beside me, pulling her sweatshirt tighter against the wind. "Grandpa," she said softly, "you were incredible last night." I shook my head. I was just doing what needed to be done. "No," she insisted. "You showed everyone the truth. Mom tried to act like she had all the power, but you took it back. You made her face what she was doing." Her words warmed me, but they also cut deep. Because behind her pride was the ache of a girl who had been forced to choose between loyalty to her mother and the truth she could not ignore. I put my arm around her shoulders. "You should not have had to carry this burden. But I am proud of you. Evelyn would be proud too." Sophie leaned her head against my shoulder. For a while, we just sat together, watching the ripples move across the water. The next day, Claire's parents returned quietly to collect some of their belongings they had smugly left behind before the party. They would not meet my eyes. Her father mumbled something about misunderstandings, but I gave no reply. Some betrayals are not soothed by apologies. They packed their car and drove away without another word. Michael, though, lingered. That evening, he came into the kitchen where I was cleaning my old mug, the one Claire had tried to bury behind her matching white cups. He stood awkwardly in the doorway, his voice low. "Dad, I don't know what to say." "You had plenty of chances to say something before," I said, not turning around. He sighed heavily. "I thought Claire was right. I thought maybe you needed help." "Help?" I set the mug down harder than I meant to. "Michael, I raised you. I paid for your schooling, kept you afloat when you almost lost your first house, gave more than I ever had to give. And when I needed you to stand up for me, you stayed silent." His eyes fell to the floor. I didn't know what to do. "Then do nothing," I said firmly. "But don't stand beside her while she tries to erase me." He nodded, shame written across his face. For the first time in weeks, he looked less like a man and more like the boy I remembered, the boy who used to sit at this same table doing homework while Evelyn hummed at the stove. But pity was a luxury I couldn't afford. Not now. That night, I called everyone into the living room. Claire sat rigid on the sofa, Michael beside her, Sophie and Ryan off to the side. I stood before them with the weight of Evelyn's memory behind me. "This is my house," I began, my voice clear and unshaken. "It always has been. You came here under the pretense of staying a few weeks, but you tried to make it permanent. You planned to move me out, to bring others in, to rewrite the life I built with Evelyn. That ends now." Claire's face twisted. "You can't just throw us out." "You have 1 week," I said flatly. 1 week to pack your things and leave. If you're not gone, I will have you removed legally. And if you ever attempt to interfere with me again, every detail of your scheme, every document, every phone call, every witness will be presented in court." Michael opened his mouth, but I held up a hand. "Number, I've said my piece. Now you decide how you want to be remembered in this family. As the son who betrayed his father, or as the man who finally found his backbone and walked away from the wrong path." Silence fell heavy. Claire's glare could have cut glass, but she knew. She had been beaten. A week later, the house was quiet again. Their cars pulled away, their bags gone, the upstairs reclaimed. Sophie hugged me tight before leaving with them, promising she'd call often. Ryan muttered a polite goodbye, his eyes glued to his phone. Michael avoided my gaze. Claire didn't speak a word. When the dust settled, I walked through the house, each room breathing again. The photos were back where they belonged. Evelyn's scarf hung untouched on its hook. My mug was at the front of the cabinet once more. The house hummed again, not with the tension of invasion, but with the quiet memory of love that had built it. That evening, I sat on the back porch, watching the lake catch the last light of day. Sophie had texted me already. "Stay strong, Grandpa. I believe in you." I smiled and tucked the phone away. Evelyn's voice seemed to echo in the breeze, her words gentle but certain. "Do not let them decide for you, George." I hadn't, not this time, and I never would again. As the sun sank over Maplewood Lake, I whispered into the fading light, "I am still here, Evelyn, and this house will remain ours until my last breath." If you like this story, subscribe and tell us about your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next one, click on the box on the screen.